This story is interesting to me. It's kind of two stories in one. There were legal actions that were taken on the issue of tobacco. So the first one is, let's talk about the U.S. one first.
Okay.
The Supreme Court refused to block California's ban on flavored tobacco.
Okay.
Okay, so you had the tobacco industry sued saying, please, for the love of God, like, don't do this. And the Supreme Court just sort of swatted it aside, so now the law is going to stand. There was an interesting argument that they made. So here's what they say in the New York Times about this.
Yeah.
The company, joined by several smaller ones, argued that a federal law, the Tobacco Control Act of 2009, allows states to regulate tobacco products, but prohibits banning them. So their argument was, you can't do, there's no legal authority for the state of California to do this because you can't ban tobacco, you can only regulate tobacco.
Right, but so what they ultimately decided is they could have a ban on flavored tobacco, right?
Correct, that was the ruling.
Because that, I guess they put in the bucket of like regulating tobacco, but not outright banning it.
Correct. So now let me bring up the New Zealand one, because this is the direction that we're marching. So New Zealand banned today's children from ever being able to buy cigarettes in their lifetime. So if you were born 2009 or later, it will always be illegal for you to buy cigarettes in New Zealand. They went a little further than that too. The new law also reduces the number of retailers that are allowed to sell tobacco. Right now it's about 6,000. They're reducing it down to 600. So it's another way of trying to sort of, and their goal, they're open about this. They say our goal really is to by 2025 get like everybody off cigarettes.
Huh.
So tell me what you think.
I mean, that one to me is more clear cut. I don't think I believe in the right of adults to like make decisions, even if those decisions are potentially unhealthy and have some like adverse consequences for themselves, as long as they're not like hurting other people. So that one to me goes way too far. I'm a little mixed on the flavored tobacco one, because I do know that cigarette companies in the past really like targeted children, and one of the ways that they did that was by the flavors that they would use. So I'm a little more open to the argument of voters in a state, and I think this was based on a referendum, being able to decide, like, we don't want these particular flavors to be sold in our stores here.
But how do you respond to the argument that it's always been illegal for kids to buy cigarettes?
Yeah, that's true. But you still can have these ad campaigns, which even though it's technically illegal, like they're really marketing to children and trying to get them to be hooked and flout the law.
But in that scenario, why wouldn't you just make it so they can't do the stealth advertising to children? You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. To regulate it on those grounds. Because look, I'm 34 years old. I got a sour apple ice vape right here. Like the idea that it's just kids that use this stuff is not true.
That's true, but you also know how prevalent like vaping is in high schools and even middle schools because the flavors are yummy.
I understand that, but again, so if you tell me...
They didn't need a marketing campaign because the product itself was pitched to them.
I know, but you can't ban it for adults. That seems crazy to me in both scenarios. I don't, like, I understand that legally speaking, maybe the court is actually correct about California.
Yeah.
Do they have the right as a state to regulate flavored cigarettes out of existence?
Yeah.
I can see an argument for that.
Yes.
I think I'd fall the other way because I would argue by regulation, it should be like the contents of the cigarette in terms of nicotine percentage, in terms of the carcinogens that are in there. I'd have no problem with even strong regulations, like to limit the number of carcinogens, limit the amount of nicotine or whatever. I think that's all a reasonable debate. But the idea of doing, banning broad swaths of like different flavors, that's just like, fuck off, man. See, here's my main issue.
My question, just to clarify your position. So in California, I believe this was a ballot initiative. So voters went to the polls and said, we want these flavors banned. Is your position that they shouldn't be able to do that? They shouldn't be able to go and vote on banning certain flavors of cigarettes? Or is your position just you personally would have voted no on that referendum?
My position is I think it's more of a rights issue than it is a democracy issue. In the same way that, and I know this is a stretch of an analogy, but in the same way that it wouldn't matter if you had a vote in a state saying, hey, should you ban the expression of very extreme political ideologies? Mm-hmm. That might come back 62% in favor of banning it.
Yeah.
I don't care. because that you're not supposed to be able to democratically vote on issues that are about rights.
Yeah,
And
see,
so,
I don't see anybody as having like an inherent right to like a, orange flavored cigarette or whatever.
yeah, but I mean,
Having a like, I agree with adults being able to buy the product in general. If you have voters in a state that are like, we feel this is harmful potentially to our kids, I don't know, I'm a little more open to that.
I hate the argument, what about the kids? It's banned for kids. If you want to come up with some strategies to, crack down harder, change the penalties, put the stores out of business if they sell to kids and you prove that they sold to kids. I'm open to that entire conversation.
Yeah.
But again, the idea for adults. Look, the thing that annoys me is that, like, this is all under the guise of like, us, the government of New Zealand, us, and the government of California, we care so much. We care so much about the people, so we need to intervene to do this because it's for their own good. But the only time any government really does this, as a general rule, it's nothing proactive, like we're going to give you health care. We're going to give you, a check every month. We're going to give you higher education. That's how you would actually help people. The way they intervene to quote unquote help people is to be like, you can't do that. Stop. You can't do that. I'm not allowing you to do that. It's like, I'm not fucking asking you your opinion on this shit. Fuck off. Get out of our lives. If you want to help, cut somebody a check. Give somebody health care. Give somebody higher education. I hate this. Like, there's the term nanny state.
Yeah.
It has there's a pejorative connotation to it, but I could see a scenario where it's like a nanny, hey, you like your nanny, they took you to the doctor and they gave you a lollipop. Like, I could see a positive connotation for it too, right?
Okay.
But this is like the bad version of the nanny state. It's like, bitch, if you want to help me, for the love of God, give me health care. Do something like that. But no, that actually requires, proactive steps and like actual organization and planning. And they go, that's too much. Instead, I'll just try to prevent you from doing something that again, I know is unhealthy.
That argument doesn't really hold up though when you consider it was the voters themselves who decided they wanted this law in the book. I just looked at it. Tobacco industry spent tens of millions of dollars in support of a measure to keep these flavors on the market. But 63% of the state's voters said no. So, that to me is a bit of a different scenario. I do think voters should be able to have some say over what is available on the market and what they think is harmful and what they don't. And especially, they obviously felt very strongly about it when it's not a close margin and when they were up against tens of millions of dollars in tobacco industry lobbying, they still were like, no, that's not what we want in our stores. I
don't care. If you took a vote, everybody on my block, hey, should Kyle stop vaping? And it comes back, all of them say, yes, I should. I don't care. I don't care what they say. They can fuck off. This is not an issue about democracy.
But
and
what
next,
I'm
by the way,
saying
are these things. These are coming next. They're going to ban these next at some point.
Nanny state argument, though, isn't really accurate when it's the voters themselves who are making
but the government has to enforce it. The government has to enforce it.
Yeah, but I'm just saying you're portraying it as like there's, they could have given us health care, but instead they do this. Well, the government is actually backing the will of the people here.
But again, the whole argument I made about they could ban bad speech, but I wouldn't care.
Yeah, but I put that in. I don't think that's the same.
It is. It's the exact same thing. Are there any issues?
I don't think there's a right to a certain type of cigarette.
But are there any issues where it shouldn't be open to a Democratic vote? Of course there are. So I just put this in that category because it's somebody.
That's where we disagree.
It's an adult putting in their body whatever they want to put in their body, and they're not hurting anybody else.
I agree more with the Supreme Court's view of this, that to ban them outright would be too far. To regulate what could be available on the market, I think that's reasonable. But
what about but the problem, again, the slippery slope argument too. What about the menthol cigarettes? This was it was a giant portion of the market. And in your conception of it, it's like, yeah, they could ban that one, but you can't touch the regular ones. That seems so silly.
No, it's just, that's a type of, it's not like an irregular cigarette. It's a cigarette that has a flavor. So yeah, if people in the state are like, we want to regulate it in this way, I don't have an issue with that.
People need to, I'm very libertarian on social issues. I think people should be able to do whatever they want to do as long as they're not hurting anybody else. I understand basic health regulations, like if a cigarette has 900 fucking carcinogens in it, then hey, regulate it down or change the ingredients. I get all that. But when it comes to something like a flavor, it's just, Because what's the limiting principle? What's the limiting principle? So what if the government came out tomorrow or people voted on it and it was like, well, soda's really bad for you, so we're going to ban orange soda, grape soda, and they just go down a list of it. It's like, at some point, you have to be like, no, this is actually authoritarian. You are being authoritarian. You are controlling adults who want to do something differently.
So let me ask you this like theoretical question. If you saw convincing evidence that there was a flavor that was basically like it was like Cocoa Puffs, and it was like basically only being consumed by children, that it had contributed to a massive increase in terms of like kids being addicted to tobacco products and nicotine, would you think that like still we can't take it off the table, or even in like an extreme sort of edge case situation like that? This is a moot point because I'm in favor of banning kids having these things. So even in that situation, but enforce the laws, enforce it. That's the issue. If there's an issue here, a lot of kids are doing it. I don't think kids should be able to do any flavor. Because you said you're open to if there's like massive carcinogens and it's not safe, then you're okay with that being regulated. So you're saying like there is a level of harm that would make it okay for this to be banned. Why doesn't your argument apply there? Well, it's like, well, regulation, not banning. If the fucking adults want to buy the like carcinogen killer, why not? Because there's regulation and banning I do put in two separate categories. And so there's a certain amount of regulation that I think could be reasonable. I think having to wear a seatbelt when you're in the car is reasonable, right? But it crosses a line to me when it goes to banning. And if they're banning whole groups of flavors, I just think that's fucking gross. And if there's an issue with kids, then come up with better laws to stop the kids from doing it and actually fucking enforce it. But again, why wouldn't your same argument apply to like, you know, it has way too, like whatever amount of carcinogens in it, but it's labeled on the product? Why wouldn't it apply there of like, well, if people want to have it available, then you can't just ban that? Because the point is not, people are not taking these things to die. That's not why they're taking it. That's a side effect, and it's something that might happen. So if we can do something to make it less terrible for you while still maintaining the integrity of having a product that's doing the thing you want it to do, then I think that's the ideal scenario. Right, but so the argument would be... So here, I'll give it crocodile. Crocodile. I don't want crocodile to be legal. Okay. But I want opioid pills to be legal. The argument would be that the flavors can be more, you know, appealing to kids, that there is a harm done there. And that's why they would say this is appropriate to regulate, just as your example of like the carcinogens. I don't buy their argument, though. Even if you argue, you know, it's as low as 40% of the market for this flavor vape is adults and 60% is kids. I say, okay, well, make sure those 60% don't get it, but don't ban it for the 40%. I'm biased. I smoke shit like this. Yeah. There's going to come a day where they want to ban this. And they can fuck off when they try to do that. They could fuck off. Like, it's super obnoxious. There's all these things that they can do to improve people's lives, and they never do shit that's actually flat out good. They have to cross the line into just being authoritarian nannies. Like, I don't do that because that's not good for you. Fuck off. This is the argument that I don't buy, though, because this wasn't the state. It was the voters who were like, this is what we want. The state carried it out. The state carried out the will of the voters. The will of the voters. Yeah, but like I said, there's a difference between will of the voters when they're taking away rights and will of the voters when they're not taking away rights. I think this is a rights issue. I don't see that, and that's just our fundamental. Okay, I don't see that there is like a fundamental right to like a whatever flavored cigarette. It's as simple as this. Should an adult be able to put in their body whatever they want to put in their body as long as they're not hurting anybody else? Yes. And they still can. They can still smoke. But not the one that they actually like. And I think that if voters in the state feel like that regulation is a net health benefit and what they want in terms of their stores, then that's okay. So why shouldn't they be able to ban all these processed foods and junk foods? Let's say there's a vote and 70% of the population says fucking ban Twinkies. What do you think? I mean, honestly, I wouldn't have a problem with... Hell no. Yeah, I wouldn't have a problem with, like, some of this shit is terrible for you. It's not your business. That doesn't matter. If you have voters who are like, you know what, let's have lower sugar lower sugar percentage in the sodas.
I didn't ask you about that. I asked you about banning Twinkies. That's what I asked you about. I didn't ask you about regulated to lower the sugar percentage. I asked you about banning Twinkies.
Listen, if 63% of California voters want to fucking ban Twinkies, I don't really care.
Fuck that. And see, this is why people get pissed at California and get annoyed with California, because the view that people have of like California, which is a democratic state, very liberal state, they look at them and they view them as like people looking down their nose at everybody else, like, I'm going to control what you do in your life because I think I'm better and I can decide these things. It's like, just mind your fucking business. Just mind your business. Nobody in Mississippi is going to try to stop me from eating a Twinkie, and they're right about that. I want a fucking Twinkie.
63% of voters in that state want these to be regulated.
Don't care.
The Supreme Court says you can regulate, not ban. I think it's the right line.
That's the crux. Okay, we'll end on this. An area of half agreement. From a legal perspective, I don't think the decision the court made was crazy. From a legal perspective.
Yeah.
But I do see an argument on the other side of it, even legally speaking. But basically what they decided is you banning the flavored cigarettes does fall more under the category of regulation than banning. That's basically what their conclusion was.
And this is a very corporate-friendly court, too, by the way, that sided this way, so... It's actually surprising.
The one time they didn't side with a corporation when they fucking should have. Thank you, SCOTUS. Come take away more stuff from me. What else do you want to ban and take away from people?
I'm actually surprised they didn't back up the tobacco companies on this one, but there you go.
Anyway, there's a nice, healthy debate for you guys.
Yes. All right. Looking forward to talking to CoffeeZilla about all things scam, including SBF. Let's get to it.
Hey, y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop. And watch that video on screen right now. You know you want to.